recording and then I. Hi, folks. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on the part of the world where you're joining us from. Welcome to the Product Leader Summit, the virtual speaker series. And I'm Mahib Bhalla. I'm your MC for today. With extensive experience in product management at companies like AT&T, Ernst & Young, and Sears, I have driven impactful digital transformations and innovative product strategies. And then let's talk about why the Product Leader series. This series is brought to you in partnership with Ha Nguyen and the Product Leader Summit. For more information, I would request that you visit their website. Our mission for the series is simple. We want to foster the next generation of product leaders, or as I say it, as product leaders of today, it's incumbent upon us to groom and mentor the product leaders of tomorrow. And the second piece of it, the other side of it, is to facilitate deeper connections and learning amongst product leaders. Because let's be honest, we just have so much to learn from each other. So today's agenda, I'll quickly walk you through it. It includes an introduction, which I'm just providing. I will introduce our coordinator for today, Brian Root. He will coordinate our panel discussion. Seems to be a very, very popular topic. We seem to have a lot of interest in this. Then we will do some Q&A. I believe there are already questions which are being pre-submitted, so we'll give time to those. Today, we will slightly change tacks in case we find that there is a lot of interest in the questions. We may not have a breakout today, but we will take a call closer to that time. And then our sincere endeavor is to try to get you out 5 minutes early so that you have breathing space before your next meetings or your next engagements. And now let me please introduce Brian Root. I have had the privilege of knowing Brian from our time at Products That Count. We were co-chairs together. He was the head of chapter for New York, and I was the head of chapter for San Francisco. So I know him from that time. Brian is a seasoned product management and design executive. He has extensive experience in developing digital products, across e-commerce, across fintech, across insurtech, right? So he knows many verticals. He specializes in enhancing user experiences and simplifying complex processes. He has a way of taking the complex and just simplifying it. His passion is in creating, scaling, and leading cross-functional product teams. And he has a particular focus on not setting up silos, but instead of breaking down silos and fostering creativity and collaboration. Please join me in welcoming Brian, our coordinator for today.
Thanks, Pete. That is a much better introduction than I probably could have given myself, so I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
As I said, I'm Brian Root. I'll be hosting the panel today. We have 4 really amazing panelists whose resumes very much outshine mine. I will let them introduce themselves here in a minute. But as Mahib said, just to quickly introduce myself, I'm a product and design leader living in New York City. And I would love to hand it over to Michael first to introduce himself.
Hey, everybody. My name is Michael Kraftt. I'm a growth and transformation focused product leader. Been leading product teams for 10 years at some big companies like American Express, some medium-sized companies, helped one company go public back in 2021. Currently, I am VP of product at a company called Ninja Trader, which is a retail direct-to-consumer futures trading platform. Nice to meet everybody.
All right.
Thanks,
I think I'm next. So hi, everyone. I'm Brenton Sellati. I'm currently the VP and head of product for Pi Insurance. It's an Series D insurtech startup, around 400 people, primarily focused on small commercial, workers' comp, and commercial auto coverage. Prior to that, I worked at Wayfair, where I was a senior director of product for a bunch of catalog merchandising supplier teams, managing about 50 teams. And I'm about 6 weeks into my new role, and I'm happy to talk more about what that journey was like. I'm based in the Boston area as well.
Hey, I'm Max Beckett, based in Seattle. So I started my career in finance and deal structuring and acquisitions, moved kind of through data science and consulting, and then Really got into product about like 6 years ago as the first product manager at a startup called Assurance, where I worked with Brian. I'm now, the head of product there, VP, and winding down that role starting in about 3 weeks as chief product officer at a company called Sunfire.
Nice. Well, Brenton, I can blame you for all my Wayfair purchases over the years. Denise Hemke, I'm Chief Product Officer at NeoGov. We have kind of two sides of our business, small to medium-sized government agencies, HR software, so all the things they need to manage their people. And then on the public safety side of the house, more kind of operational tool sets, think about things that law enforcement, fire, and 911 need to operate on a daily basis. And I've been in the industry, for 20 years now. I like to say I'm rounding a decade in engineering, roughly a decade in product. Spent time at Workday leading their analytics business unit as general manager and leading product management strategy. And then prior to this, I was chief product officer at Checker, which is a background check company. Maybe many of you, as you get employed, have an experience with Checker.
Awesome. Thanks, Denise. Obviously, some really impressive backgrounds all around here. So let's get started with the actual discussion. As a data-driven PM, I really can't resist starting off with a data point. According to an article published on Crunchbase last week, over 54,000 tech employees have lost their jobs so far in 2024. So it is really wonderful to see such a large audience for this panel, but it's also kind of bittersweet because I think given that context, I'm going to make an educated guess that most folks in the audience are either actively looking for a new job or considering it as a real possibility in the near future. So I'd love for Michael to get us started here and then open up the rest of the panel. Michael, if you could take us back to when you were in the audience's shoes. How did you initiate your job search? And is there anything you wish you'd done differently at the beginning?
Yes, thanks, Brian. So, perhaps like many of you, I was at a company that, was going through like multiple rounds of layoffs, kind of not knowing what was going to happen. And then sort of back in December, probably a month before that, I caught wind that could happen. And it did. And I was laid off in December. And so I was in this position of like, oh, shoot, this market stinks. What do I do? And somebody had clued me in, and this is not some infomercial. Somebody had clued me into the Never Search Alone community, which I would highly recommend. I won't kind of go into all of that, but I think they have an approach that I really liked, which was sort of go slow to go fast. And I think the scattershot approach of just like submitting your resume on LinkedIn like will not work. I mean, I submitted a bunch of resumes on LinkedIn. I probably had a 0% hit rate on sending LinkedIn messages. So I think part of it is sort of, what do I want? What do I want to do? What do I like about my job? Company culture, company size, company stage. These are really good things to think about. And what do I don't want? And then they talk a lot about candidate market fit, because you have to realize that when you're starting off this search, you are the product. So like from the outside looking in, and you should get feedback from other people who you trust in your network. What do you see when you see my LinkedIn profile? What am I good at? Where have I driven an impact? And I think you need to get a really good understanding of who you are and then how you represent yourself to companies. And I think you need to go through a process of sort of matching, here's what I want with here's what I'm good at, and here's what my background reflects, and sort of start repositioning your LinkedIn, which is your face to the world, to optimize for that kind of candidate market fit. And you can, the whole slew of Gen AI tools that you can use there. And then a couple things that I did that I thought were really, like, for me, worked well. Number one, like activating my network on LinkedIn. I sent one of those posts that is real scary to send, which is like, hey, everybody, like, I'm a free agent. I appreciate my time at my last company. This is what I'm looking for. I'll probably be reaching out to you. Like I got a few interviews just off of that. And it's scary to send something like that, but I think you can position it in a helpful way. I really think it's important to hone your elevator pitch, your sort of about me pitch, your 3 bullet points. Here's who I am. Here's what I'm looking for. like you're going to be sending that to tons of recruiters and your networking contacts. Like that is really important to crystallize. And then I would say the last thing that I thought about was who's helped me the most over the years, right? You're a product leader. We're not, 2 years into your career. There have been a few people, and you should think through every job that you've had who have been really instrumental in sort of lifting you up over time. That is kind of who I started with in my networking, because it wasn't like, hey, let me just go straight to the companies that I like want to work at. It was like, who's helped me the most? Let's set up time with them and get some guidance. And again, this whole like go slow to go fast, I think, and having a really thoughtful approach was really helpful for me.
Are you taking questions?
We will try to, I think, take some questions at the end.
At the end, okay. Yep.
Please. But any other panelists want to contribute to what Michael said?
I mean, I'm happy to jump in. I also started a new role in January. And I think the thing that I would give you maybe that's additive to Michael, and then I'll give you sort of a slightly different approach that I took, is back to Michael's point about, what is the value that you provide? As a hiring manager, I cannot tell you the number of times I look at resumes and I see all the features that somebody delivered, right? And I've even seen some recently where it's like shipped 63 features, in X period of time. I think those days are kind of behind us and done, right? Like what people want is they want to know what are the outcomes that you drove, right? I saw X increase in adoption. I was able to, drive Y amount of new revenue, decrease churn rate by X. And so I would just like say, to add to what Michael said, is like, as you think about refining your resume, think about the outcomes that you drove and not the task list that you executed against. And I think that that's really critical in how you position yourself. And then I'll say, like, my experience, well, I think a lot of what Michael said was true, was also a little bit different for me. And so I think this might be somewhat unique to people that are in more senior roles. But when you think about the network that you're activating, if you're looking for somebody, if you're looking for a senior role, and so probably for those of you that are at that kind of VP and up level, I would say use the executive search firms. If you are not using the executive search firms and you are not using the talent management side of venture capital, you're missing the boat, right? And so there's a lot of folks, think about your Heidrick and Struggles of the world. There's a bunch of executive search firms in this space. And if you don't have networks into those firms, go back to Michael's advice of the people that helped you. Look at the people that are more senior that you reported into. They probably have contacts too. And there's somebody that knows your work, right? And is willing to put, their name out there and say, hey, X person from this executive search firm, you should connect with this individual on my team, and then curate that network over time, right? If you don't have it today, just fast forward to the future, you might find yourself in this position or a slightly different position in the future. But think about, like, how do I continue to invest in building that network? Because it will benefit you. So if you don't have it, this is a catalyst to build it. But then I would certainly do it. And there are talent firms at the VC, like within the VCs or talent management folks. Think about recruiters that are really, their focus is how do I get great talent into my portfolio companies? And so again, like, how can you make inroads in there? And I would really, again, lean on the senior folks that that might have connections there to help make those introductions, because that is simply what I did. I did what Michael said, thought about deeply what I wanted. And then I really said to them, these are the things that I'm looking for. These are the things that I do not want to do. And I was very clear with them as to what I was looking for. And then they could come to me and say, hey, here's an opportunity that I think matches what you're looking for, Denise.
So Denise, just to ask a follow-up question on what you said there. And sorry, Max, I'll return to you in a second. I think a lot of folks, are kind of comfortable wrapping their heads around how do I get that initial conversation with an executive recruiter? But if that doesn't yield a job immediately, that kind of how do I continue that contact becomes a lot more murky. Can you speak to how you maintain that relationship?
Sure. I think for me, like I did go through a process, and I did get some interviews. And actually got to a position where I was neck and neck for a CPO role, and I didn't get it, right, during this process. And so after that, you're sort of pressing the reset button and starting all over again. And also it kind of coincided with the holiday time. And so to your point, like, how do I, kind of continue that piece? So I would say, first of all, yeah, get the introduction in the door, and then think about your pitch, right? Your elevator pitch of what you care about. And then, for example, like when I hit that point where I needed to sort of re-engage, and by the way, they are constantly getting more recs, right? Just like you're constantly going to your recruiters and saying, I have this new role on my team. So don't jump at the thing that you don't want. Wait for the thing you do want, because this is your life, right? And you're going to be doing this job every single day. So wait, they will get more recs. Know that they will come to you. But if you need to keep that connection warm, I think it's fair to reach out and say, hey, listen, what I said was like, I went through some interviews, I was very close to a position. It didn't work out. And now, after the holidays, just wanted to retouch base to kind of see, what are you seeing in the market? And I would also use them to understand what they are seeing in the market. They can tell you, hey, we're seeing a lot more over here versus there. I'm at a private equity backed company. I've never worked for private equity before. And so that was new for me. I had to do a lot of learning and research on PE, because frankly, they are seeing a lot more PE opportunities, or at least they were this fall. And into the early parts of the new year. And so I actually leveraged a different group, an executive women in product group. For those of you women who aren't in it, you should potentially join it. And I did an impromptu roundtable where I found 3 people that were willing to talk to me about what PE meant. Right. And so I say it to say that you can find ways to keep it warm. And then on an ongoing basis, like even once you're employed, touch base with these people periodically, right? They'll reach out to you, you reach out to them. But just kind of, do what you normally do and nurturing connections, because these people do have access to incredible opportunities that you would otherwise not get to see. You're not going to find them on a job board.
Awesome. Thanks, Denise. And Max, I cut you off by accident. Please.
No, that's okay. I'm used to you cutting me off in meetings, Brian. So this is nothing new. So I wanted to double click on one thing that Denise said about like cultivating the network that you have. So I think, I personally have always really thought that I sucked at networking but really I think like networking, the mental model that helped me with this is to expand and strengthen your network. And so I always thought of like, adding new nodes to your network, and that's really difficult, but there's another way to do it, and that's strengthen the edges between the nodes you already have. And that's, really just relationship building, keeping in touch with the people that you have worked with, that, you are excited about what they're doing. And that's really been what's successful to me, because like the reaching out to new people, establishing new connections, that's important. It's valuable. I find it mentally and emotionally exhausting, and I hate it. And so, the difference between my last job search and this one that really has kind of paid off is over the past 5 years, the leaders that I've worked with, whether or not they're at my company or companies that I'm adjacent to, if they're doing cool things on cool projects that I care about, like just get coffee with them once a quarter and like, be interested in their product, be interested in talking about, what they're doing, what their challenges are. So, when you get to the point of looking for your next job, people who, even if they don't have a position open from you, they're willing to go to bat for you because they know that you're great to work with. They know that you have interesting things to say. They know you care about problems. And that's kind of how I landed, the offers that I had this round.
Awesome. Thanks, Max. Let's change gears a little bit. I think it's fair to say that for nearly everyone, the number of rejections that you're going to receive will be far larger than the number of interviews or job offers you receive over the course of any job search. Brenton, can you talk to us about how you handle rejection or setbacks and stay motivated during your job search?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's going to have a little bit of a segue from our prior conversation, because if you think about this whole thing as test and learn for your candidate market fit, you're going to have some hypotheses that you have to see what hits and what doesn't. And just because you tried something it didn't hit doesn't mean it's wrong. And so don't just like double back right away. There's a couple different dimensions here. Like we just talked about, what is the type of company you're aiming for? Are you aiming for a mature public company, a mature private company, or something that's very nascent? Is it venture backed? Is it PE backed? Is it public? Like what, as you think about that landscape and where you want to play and why, start thinking about where you're testing for what you're aiming for, and then take the feedback you get from the market on how you can either retool and refine your approach, or something that maybe isn't what you're looking for. So I think if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. And if you're just throwing yourself at every opportunity that presents itself as potentially a fit, and you're not getting it, you will start to potentially feel dejected because it's like all the doors are shutting. If you have a plan for how you're going to systematically explore opportunities in the areas that you think are valuable, then any company or any given interview, that's just one shot on goal. And you can think about, how can I iterate more within that space? And so I think having that perspective and having that context is really crucial. And that will give you some sense of, where do I go from here? What do I take away from this experience where I was rejected, didn't get what I wanted? And how do I move forward? To make that tangible, I almost entirely did my search through executive recruiters. And, I met with 3 different partners at Riviera Partners. For the most part, I'd meet with those folks once, and then I wouldn't hear from them again. Even though I would follow up and I'd say, how are things going? And, yada, yada. That didn't happen with one partner who ended up actually having several sort of months of back and forth with me. But like, sometimes senior roles at the right companies aren't opening every day. So sometimes you have to sort of be on their radar for a couple of months for the right thing to come along. But in a lot of cases, I think the way that I initially pitched myself and framed myself to those executive recruiters, especially early on, did not serve me well, because I didn't have that sort of product market fit or candidate market fit in mind. And it was about what I wanted and what I was looking for and what I thought I would be good at. I wasn't thinking about how the market would perceive me and how I could frame what I wanted from that other end of the table. So that was my big unlock. The thing that I think I did wrong was I pitched myself as being too technical and too focused on e-commerce. And so as I brought into my story more about the early innovation work that I did in Liberty Mutual's innovation lab, and I was managing, experiences that were supplier facing and our pricing and promotion systems and working with merchandisers, that really rounded out the way that I talked about myself. And that made me a lot more marketable. So I'll sort of pause and pass the mic back there. But I think the answer to this question really does have a connection back to candidate market fit, knowing where you want to explore, and then iterating and being open to signal on where you need to improve, or maybe it's not the right fit for you right now.
Awesome. Thanks, Brenton. Anybody else want to chip in?
I think, I'll just say very quickly, I was getting a steady stream of interviews. I was making it pretty far in them. You just have to try and learn from each one. It's like I think of it like a conversion funnel in e-commerce. You got to feed the top of the funnel with lots of things. And, there are going to be some jobs that you, off the bat, I'll tell you, the company that I ended up with, I was pretty lukewarm about when I heard about like what they were. And then there were others that I was like, oh, that's the role for me. And then you sort of learn more. And then you're like, okay, actually, this company is really cool. Like this company that I'm now at, NinjaTrader, they have really good product market fit. They're growing really fast. Like it's awesome from a product perspective. But my point was going to be, as you are getting rejected, like try and learn, ask for feedback. Like what was it about me? Just try and learn. I remember there was one example where I was giving a presentation to a kind of like a Series B AI company. And I, used Canva and I made this awesome presentation and I was like super jazzed. I answered all their questions. I went above and beyond, and I didn't get and this for a chief product officer role, I didn't get it. And the feedback that I got was, while you're giving the presentation, it's not just you answering the question, but we want to also hear examples of like how you've done that thing in the past. And you really were just like very lasered in on like specifically answering the question. So I said, okay, great. Noted. And I was able to take that feedback, and help me the next time that I had one of those things, really have it be more of a mix of, me answering their question, but also demonstrating to them that I've done these things before. Because I think Denise said something like that, like the thing that they're looking for is they want somebody who's going to inspire and grow their business, but they also need to de-risk, because this is a very expensive, high profile, role for them. And they can't hire the wrong person. So if you are promising, but you haven't like been there before, there's like too many people in the market, now for them to, take somebody who has, been like a junior level director and stick them at a VP. They're going to be taking people that have already had that role, already done that thing. So just, something to think about, like they want people who've been there before. So, good food for thought. Also, Brenton, as you're talking about like candidate market fit, like you just have to sort of know where your market is, right?
If I could double down on what you just said, though, that's so important. In this market, you are, over the past 5 to 7 years, if you wanted to have accelerated career growth in terms of title and scope and compensation, your dominant strategy was to like basically job hop, right? And to like find those stretch roles that someone would bet on you for. That is not this current market. So as you think about your fit, trying to position yourself as being a strong candidate for a stretch role is going to be much more low probability and frankly reflective on your tone deafness or savviness as a candidate to try to position yourself as something that actually is high risk to an organization, right? I went from managing 50 teams at Wayfair to managing 15 at my current company. Now, partially that's what I was looking for. I wanted to run a smaller organization and to be, the whole pie, even if the pie was smaller, rather than a small slice of a big slice of a much bigger pie. But like your credibility and being savvy about how you position yourself and your expectations is really important. And in this market, generally look for lateral at best, if not maybe a step down, because companies want to de-risk those decisions, especially for executive roles.
Denise, I saw you came off mute. Is there something you'd like to add to?
I think both you touched on something there that I think we should just be explicit about. If you aren't getting feedback, ask for the feedback, right? The recruiter will often give you feedback. And so make sure you're doing that so that you can test and learn. And then I would also maybe just the piece that I was thinking about most was like also the personal side of this. I mean, I know we're focusing a lot on, hey, how do you find fit with the job? But how do you also take care of yourself in that moment? And so whatever it is that you like to do to de-stress, whether I found myself, I was joking with people, I was like Forrest Gump, like walking and walking and walking. And that gave me a chance to like listen to some podcasts that I never was able to prioritize. A lot of those podcasts were often very AI focused too, because I'm just a big nerd. And it also gave me a lot of interesting conversation to talk about in terms of, how am I bringing in things that are very relevant into those interviews? Hey, I heard this on this podcast recently, something I've been thinking about. And so find ways to just care for yourself too, to help de-stress. I cannot emphasize that enough. And don't just, focus on the search itself. And maybe back to, I haven't read Never Search Alone, but I'm assuming that also is partnership with other human people. Find those people that can also kind of lift you up in those moments and remind you, that you are great and that you will find something. And just, I can't de-emphasize the kind of that softer side of this too.
Awesome. So Michael, I want to return to you. You mentioned interviewing. Once you get that interview, how did you prepare? And were there any specific tactics that you found most beneficial?
Yeah, I mean, I think you gotta anticipate the questions. You gotta do research on the company. So I would say a few things that works really well. First of all, you've got to like nail your elevator pitch tailored to that company. You really should know the company. I mean, I literally would go into ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to produce a business value, a business model canvas, a SWOT analysis, Porter's 5 forces, biggest growth opportunities, like competitor deep dive. I just read that stuff, trying to add to it, just helps think about like the different avenues so that when one of those things comes up in an interview, you can say, oh, well, I've thought about that. And again, it's more to spur your thinking, not to just sort of give you the answer. But I think that can be very helpful. The other thing I like to do is look at the job description. Probably the hiring manager wrote that job description. And if they have requirements, you need to make sure that you have a story that answers each of the requirements, because those are probably going to be highly correlated with the questions that they ask in the interview. So that's another thing that you can do. And I would just, try and do a little LinkedIn research on the executive team, who you might be meeting with. If you have anything in common, I think, Denise talked about like the personal side of all of this, right? The more connection that you can build with the people that you meet with, I think the better. And if you can talk to people at the company that are outside of your interview tree, like that obviously is very helpful as well.
I'm just going to add something real quick because I went about it in a very similar way to Michael. Just as a resource, if you go to like McKinsey or Bain or BCG and get like they almost always have like free industry analyses that you can download. They give like pretty well thought through, thought-provoking summaries that provide some good topics of conversation with the leadership.
Oh, that's another one. Many product leaders and CEOs of companies do podcasts, and I cannot tell you how helpful that is. They will give you the answer to sort of what they're thinking. They'll be on a podcast or a video, and they'll be talking about like, here's where we're going the next 3 years that you can't find on the website. You can't find it on the, on the internet at all, but like the answer might be there. So you can sort of watch some of those. I found that very helpful. Like somebody's got a blog, like read their blog. That's probably insight into their mind.
Yeah, the only things I would say that are creative to that is like you can also sometimes find either positive or negative on YouTube for people talking about that company. In both my checker role, I found some negative commentary. Unfortunately, background checks during COVID was really tough with court closures. And so was able to sort of bring some of that into the conversation. In this role at NeoGov, brought in some of what I saw customers doing because they were educating even their community out there on YouTube. And so kind of, again, to the same points here, how can you take these things that really show you've done your homework and that you're taking the relevant pieces of that and bringing it into the conversation to show that preparation, I think is really key. And I'll say, I've even heard the CEO mention that he knew I'd watch these things because of the way I interleaved that into some of the discussion. And so I think that shows really well. So spend the time, right? Spend the time, do the prep.
The one watch out on this is make sure that you don't just regurgitate what you heard or read or saw. You have to synthesize it and come back with a value-added perspective that like demonstrates the thought partnership you can bring to the leadership team. So I think absolutely like do your homework, but know that the homework does not stop at like, I watched your stuff and I'm going to parrot it back to you. A lot of CEOs, especially good ones, have very good bullshit detectors, and they know that people generally want to tell them what they want to hear because they want to make the person happy. So, think about how you would take that. And if you have a bit of a spicy take on something, think about maybe not dropping it with like by the way, I think that this part of your strategy is terrible, but be like, yeah, and this part of your strategy, I was thinking about and I had some questions on that. If we have time, I'd love to pick your brain more on that. So you sort of see how much they're willing to go there. And like, if you can make it into more of a working session on the company's strategy where you have enough context to actually engage on that piece of the surface area, that's when an interview is going to really be differentiated. And that CEO can see in real life, or whoever the interviewer is, what it would be like to have you as a thought partner on their leadership team.
Awesome. Folks, we have 2 more questions we'd like to get through, and then we'll hand it over to the audience. But we've had some great discussion around initiating a job search, interviewing. Would love to talk about what happens when we actually land that elusive job offer. So Max, if you can lead us off here. Did you negotiate your offer at all? And if so, how? I'd love to hear if it was focused solely on financial components or whether there were additional aspects of that.
Yeah. So absolutely negotiated. Talked with it probably took like 3 to 4 weeks of going back and forth before we really landed on something that felt good for all parties. And I would say that the financial piece was probably the smallest component of the negotiation. This is a private equity backed company, and so a lot of it was focused on what is base comp look like versus the equity or the management incentive plan. How do you balance those? Like, what are the really getting kind of firm on what the opportunities for growth in equity are, making sure that's really clear in terms of what my performance is versus what the firm is looking for, because private equity companies are managing pretty tightly to a plan, and so I wanted to make sure that that was pretty well lined up. But then in terms of the non-financial components, the things that were important to me were, first and foremost, I'm on paternity leave and I didn't want to give up a single day of that. So negotiating start date out was, pushed out 2 months, right? So that was something to talk about for a bit. And then the other thing was, I feel like it's very important to fall in love with the problem. So one, I was in love with the problem of what they were trying to do with the product. But two, from a product leadership perspective, you also have to kind of fall in love with the problem of, how do you run a product organization to get there? And so really understanding deeply, what did I need? Like, what was the state that they were in? And this is something kind of uncovered through the interview process. Like, where is product today? What is it? Is it, sort of sales led? Is it a feature team? Knowing what I needed that product team to look like in order to achieve the business goals and build what we wanted to do, and make sure that we the organization, the reporting structure, the resources, like that plan was in place for me to be successful there, for me to grow and make this an opportunity, not just to build what I thought would be awesome, but grow as a product leader was set up well. So, we talked a lot about what would it look like to move product out of the reporting structure that was in right now into something else? What would it look like for me to, have ownership of a certain, P&L, et cetera, as like a general manager? So those were things that were a very important part of the negotiations for me.
Thank you. Anybody else have something they'd like to share?
I was maybe on the opposite end of that spectrum. So my executive recruiting partner, we talked about compensation expectation upfront, because if we're not within a pretty aligned radius to begin with, then we shouldn't even proceed. It's not the right fit. And like, in my experience, good exec recruiters will have a open, transparent conversation about comp expectation upfront. And the more that you can just say what you're looking for, and if that's a step up or a step down, just be open with it. And so because we had done that, when it got to that portion of my process, there was very little negotiation. There was like a very small amount of just talking about a piece of the cash. But other than that, I was already bought into the company's upside. I already knew what the total package would be if the company had sort of an exit on the trajectory it was going for. I did get access to confidential information about cash balance, burn rate, a little bit more detail on the catalyst to get to profitability and an IPO timeline and such. So, but that was more just making sure that I had the confidential information that would help me make sure that what I was signing up for was what I expected. But it probably took about 3 days between my initial offer and then signing on the dotted line, because a lot of that pre-alignment happened up front. I'll also add, there are really good executive compensation reports. Riviera puts out an executive compensation report. So I also knew what the market comps were. I knew what the benchmarks were. So I had a good sense of the attractiveness of my offer relative to what other, Series D, VP, or CPO candidates were getting.
Great. So
I was just going to add, this website I just posted in the chat, fairoffer.ai, I think is a pretty good one that allows a customizable search. I would recommend that one.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. All right, we'll move along to our last question, and then we'll open up the audience. Denise, I'd love for you to give us our last response here. And what do you believe a first 3 to 6 months in a new role looks like for a product leader who's very successful? And how did you prepare yourself for that?
I wish I had a book I could wag at you. So imagine I've got one. If you haven't read The First 90 Days, you knew where I was going. You knew where I was going. You read my mind. Thank you. That book is a gem. Yes, I see other people in the audience have it. If you haven't read it, you should read it. I think it helps you with that diagnosis, right? Which I think reading that before you go into the interview is actually very good too, because it'll get you asking the right questions to help make that diagnosis about what state is this in, right? What state is the product team and the company in? Are they in this aggressive growth state, right? Where you need to come in really bullish and make some big moves potentially, and you've got the ammunition to do that. Are they in this state where you just need to be in a more steady state? You don't want to rock the boat too much. And so I think making that diagnosis is right. And then I think the first 30 days, which they sort of outline in the book, is really critical. I do a tour. I literally talk to every single person on my product team. I have the same 5 questions that I ask them. And so then I can use that. I love the word that was used before by Brenton, synthesize that into what I'm hearing, and then finding a place to get an early win. Right. And those things will often come to you through those discussions, right? Or discussions with your cross-functional partners who you should be going through a similar interview process with as well. And so find that place to get that early win, and then use that to really diagnose what are the next series of things that I need to do? What are sort of the next wins that I need to get for the organization? So I'd like to think about it very systematically. I like to do a lot of listening up front, a lot more listening than talking, and then really use that to sort of plot out what I need to do. And then I cannot speak, enough to the fact that, like, if you're working directly for the CEO, do make sure that you're spending a lot of time with them. You're asking them oftentimes to hand the reins to you, right? Where they have been the one doing that guidance and making a lot of these calls. And so you've got to earn their trust. And so find ways to earn their trust. And I think that that actually does carry down into all levels of the organization, in the sense that you're doing the same thing for your boss, whatever level they are. I think it becomes even more high stakes if you're reporting to the CEO. So make sure to spend time with that individual as well. Be overly communicative, earn their trust. This is what I see. This is what I'm going, the plans I'm planning to take. Does that sound right to you? Am I seeing this right? So that's my advice on where to start.
Awesome. Thank you. Brenton?
Yeah, well, one quick pile on, and then I know we want to get to questions, so I'll keep it brief. The people that you have a true high trust, high bandwidth communication relationship in the organization, the telltale sign of that is this thing that I call little whispers. When you have little back and forth pinged with someone on Slack, on Teams, on text, whatever it is, that's a high trust, high bandwidth relationship. If you're a CPO and you do not have that with your CEO, I would be afraid, and I would work on that. But this actually applies to the peers that you have to work with, your heads of design, your heads of engineering. Those may be your peers, they could be your boss, they could report to you. But think about who are the folks that I have to cultivate those high trust, high bandwidth relationships with, and put in the effort to do that. If you are giving them little whispers, they will usually reciprocate, and if not, sort of diagnose what's going on there. The other thing I would say is, as a product leader specifically, your product is the business, your product is the organization, and your product is the rhythms of business that power the organization. Your job is to build a delivery machine. And so the more you get sucked into the fires of the day and trying to solve the problems that really folks on your team should be solving, just because you can do that doesn't mean you should do that. And so be very, very careful with where you take your eye off the ball on making sure that you have the right delivery machine, foundation set up, versus focusing on sort of very acute problems or fires that are more related to a specific product, a specific business unit, et cetera. You may have to do that, but just be very, very thoughtful about it, because any leverage that you're spending yourself there, you're not spending on creating it more broadly across your team.
Awesome. Thanks, Brenton. We have gone well over the panel time, which I think is fine. Great discussion. Thank you, everybody. But I'll take a step back and let's hand it over to some audience questions. Mahip, do you have anything queued up?
Yes, please. Yeah, there are tons of questions. Very engaged audience. Thank you, folks. We really, really love that. The first question queued through for Denise. Denise, let's say I have to start in the cold. I don't have engagements. I don't have relationships built with the executive recruiters. You talked about it. How do we get started? So assuming we were starting today, how do we get started cultivating those relationships? Where do we find them? How do we engage with them? What are some of the tips that you would have to offer the audience there?
Yeah,
Starting from the cold.
sounds good. And I'd go back to those people that know your work, and are more senior than you. And so I would go back to those individuals and start with, hey, I'm searching for a job, would love to connect with you. I did some hikes with some previous bosses, did some, coffees or what have you. And then through that process too, right? Oftentimes if they had connections, then they'd open up those connections to me, right? Somebody would say, hey, I know, somebody at this VC firm, this VC firm, this VC firm, would you like me to make an introduction? Right. And again, it's just that initial conversation. I think you've got to ready that pitch for yourself. And so you've got to have gone through that introspection of what do I want, so that when you do have that conversation, you're positioning yourself well. And again, like through those discussions, they will sometimes make further connections. I would just think about, who do you know, right? Who has seen and observed your work and knows that you will be a great addition to a company, and ask those people, right, for a favor, right? Ask them for coffee, ask them for, lunch, and ask them to, help you make those connections. So I would use the people in your network.
Awesome. And then the next question's around the fact that firms now seem to be preferring specialists over versatile generalists. This is a question coming from Mike Halpert. So he asks, like, how can we better position ourselves for these niche roles, and what strategies really help you stand out in this highly competitive market?
I would question the premise that you have to have a niche background for a niche role. I think ultimately, just like people hire products to solve problems, organizations hire product leaders to solve problems. So how can you demonstrate across your career how you've been a dynamic, high agency problem solver, and then either tying the opportunity to something that is correlated with work you've done in the past? Ideally, if it's exactly like work you've done in the past, that's an easy correlation to make. But how could you generalize what you've done to fit that? And how could you also talk about, if it's something that maybe has a less alignment with your track record, why you are very excited about the problem, and why, as a general athlete, you can make the case that you will be able to take on this new challenge. So I would not accept the framing that without having done it before or done it like a very similar version before, that you're not a fit. Some recruiters and some hiring teams may have said that as a constraint, but I think that is not something that is true generally.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think it goes back to something Brenton said earlier about what people are looking to do is de-risk, right? And specialization, like looking for a specialist, feels like a cheap and easy way to de-risk a hire when you have a surplus of supply of candidates. And so it just puts a little bit more of the burden on you to say, well, no, I'm not a specialist, but here's why, based on my experience, this is not risky, right? So I agree with Brenton on that.
There will be exceptions, like you want to get into cybersecurity and you have no cybersecurity background. Like, again, you have to bring your executive judgment to the table. Like, I can transition from e-commerce into insurance or into, B2B SaaS or something. I have an insurance background from Liberty Mutual, so that helped. That was 7 years ago. But there are other areas where it may be truly deeply specialized. And so again, your mileage will vary, but in general, I don't buy the premise that that the majority of the market is focused on niche specialized skill sets. But that may not be true in edge cases.
Yeah, I think I agree with your point of view on this. I think what I've been finding tricky lately is it's kind of getting past that first round of the gatekeeper. So even if you have an introduction to the CEO or somebody else in a very senior role, hiring manager, they'll say, oh, talk to this person on the hiring team first. And the person on the hiring team doesn't fully understand the product role or what it means to be general athlete. I'm finding it sometimes trickier to get past those gatekeepers.
My suggestion, this is something of the problem I had at first, and I framed what I wanted to the other party. Like, here's what I'm looking for, here's what I'm good at, based on what I believed about myself. I didn't think of it from their lens. And if I were to like be on their side of the table looking at me, how would I, what would my what would my assumptions be? Like what am I looking for in this role? And so I guess I would encourage you to think about how you frame and package yourself is really, really critical. And if you can improve how you're doing that, you will be able to find more overlap with what the hiring manager is looking for and what you bring to the table. And so be open to iterating on that. That's probably the number one area that everyone can constantly A/B test and refine. Balance what you're actually good at, what you're actually interested in, what you've actually done, what the company needs, and try to connect those in a way that may not be like 100% overlapping, but you can tell a story of where there is overlap and where there's not how that's an area that you can de-risk that, you're excited about it, you've done similar work before, whatever it might be.
But I think that kind of goes back a little bit to the whole like candidate market fit, where it's sort of like you may have a perception that like I'm a fit for this, but like, can you find people like recruiters, mentors, people that are your peers in other companies who can give you feedback on your pitch and what you're saying and how you're positioning yourself? Like, I think that is massively high value. I got some recruiters that I had worked with in the past to give me some feedback, like how am I landing? What do you see when you see my LinkedIn? Like, here's my story. Does it make sense? You should maybe tweak it a little bit like this. Oh, play up your Amex experience in this particular case, but do your sort of going public experience in that kind of case. So I think just being really thoughtful about your positioning, I think, is important.
Folks, thank you. Those are some great thoughts. I think we covered a lot of ground in this, during this conversation today. But we have to keep. I know we are enjoying this. I know this is very, very useful. But we got to keep an eye on the clock. Quick 30 seconds final thoughts from each of the panelists, please. Brian, if you can please help me here. We would want you to bring it together. We would want you to provide our audience some takeaways. So please, Brian.
Let me actually go last, if you don't mind. I don't want to steal anybody's thunder here. Denise, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just start with like same things we've been saying. Do that deep introspection, find what you're looking for, leverage your network, and then take care of yourself through this process. I think those are kind of the key things that will keep you going through all this. And just remind yourself, you've done great things before, you will do great things again, right? So if you're ever feeling kind of down in the moment.
Brenton, would you like to go next?
Oh, go ahead.
Sure. In addition to everything we said, have a opinion about what you're good at and what you're looking for, and interview the company. And if you're coming in as an executive, interview the executive team. Do they want someone who's going to come in and execute on their vision, or someone who's going to truly bring product thought leadership and help them pressure test their thinking and evolve their strategy? The VP and CPO roles have notoriously short tenures because product leaders join organizations where there's misalignment there. So don't just rush for any role that will accept you. Really know what you're looking for and do a reverse interview. And don't be afraid to say no if it's not the right fit. It is way worse as a leader to have short tenures on your background, and especially strings of them, than to wait longer and to bide your time for the right role.
Max, would you like to go next? Then we'll close with Michael.
Yeah, sure. I think that it's tough to have a novel thing to add on to the great things that have already been said, but the job search shouldn't start when you're searching for the job, right? Developing and maintaining relationships in that network over time is going to make it just a lot easier whenever you actually are looking for that opportunity, and you will have that sort of de-risked reference, and you'll know a lot more about the opportunities available, and you'll be able to choose from jobs that you're really kind of in love with.
All right. I've got a little bit of a different direction. I'm going to give you like a little bit of like tactical quick hits of things that I think people should sort of jot down, or things that worked for me. Number one, you can manage your search in like a CRM like Notion. You keep all your contacts. Here's my little about me blurb, articles that you find, feedback that you get, just like keep stuff in a place. Also set goals for yourself. People you're going to read, per week, how many people you're going to reach out to, recruiters and networking and jobs you apply for. I think that's really helpful. Number two, create like a company list. Like I posted on here, Join Prospect has a good list of companies. Think about companies that just raised money. That is, generally they are going to be like hiring roles, especially in your area. Take the time to read if you can, like Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. Teresa Torres, like the Working Backwards guys from Amazon, like there's so much. Is a good time to sort of read and double down on learnings that you have. I strongly recommend, I don't get a kickback like Akash Gupta. Like he is so good. He's got like a $15 a month, podcasts and articles. Like they are so good. They have so many interview tips. There's a really good article here that I posted on product VP interviews, like he's outstanding. And I would say practice interviewing, find a sparring partner, like through Product Leadership Summit, you know, find somebody that you can practice interviews with, case interviews. And then I was just going to say, recruiters can't double down on that recruiter thing. Like really try a systematic approach, figure out who the main recruiters are. Heidrick and Struggles, Egon Gender, Russell Reynolds, Spencer Stewart, Artisanal, Riviera, like find people at those places. To Denise's point, find people that can refer you in, because those, I mean, like Brenton was saying, like that is literally like how I was just getting interviews constantly. That is absolutely critical. And yeah, try and have fun with it. Like I know it stinks. Try and keep your, you know, your motivation level up enough, but like it isn't, you know, I went from a company that was doing tons and tons of layoffs, and now like they're coming in and saying like, hey, you know, tell us who we need to hire. We need to invest. It's very like different type of mindset. And that's the opportunity for you, hopefully, as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Michael. A lot of good tips and tricks there. I think some really fantastic piece of advice and points made by everyone throughout this. The only thing I can think to add, honestly, is just remember to be kind to yourself, right? You're not your job search. It's a very difficult process. Just have some compassion for yourself as you go through this, and know you're definitely not alone. So on behalf of the audience, Denise, Brenton, Michael, Max, thank you so much for participating. This has been wonderful. I hope this really helps a lot of folks out there. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This has been wonderful. You know, especially given the audience engagement. Thank you for all the valuable tips that you shared. Michael, loved how you broke it down into a tactical approach. That was a practical takeaway. So thank you, folks. Thanks also to Juhi, my partner in crime here, the other volunteer on the PLS side. PLS is a thriving community, right? We invite you to join our Slack channel. To Michael's point, we do have sparring partners. I found my sparring partners for case interviews at that channel as well. So would welcome you to engage with the community. And then a pitch for our NPS survey. We learn from your feedback. This session was brought to you because it was one of the highest ranking comments in the surveys that we received. So please, we as product leaders, we like to learn from how well our product is doing. We get to learn that from the NPS survey. So another pitch to fill out that survey, please. And with that, I'll sign you off. Thank you very much. Hope all of you have a good weekend. Thanks again to our speakers. Bye-bye.